Shalom. This week's Sedra is Sedra Vayechi, the last Sedra in this Sefer Bereshis. Imagine being given a promise by God that all the blessings in your life would double. Imagine waiting years for the promise to come true, yet suffering through tragedy after tragedy, knowing that one day the promise of God will come to fruition. Imagine that you knew exactly how the promise was going to come true, and then watching in pain as the path you thought the promise would be borne through dies. Imagine that with all that pain and disappointment, you still have faith that God will fulfill His promise. But then, you find yourself sick and dying on your deathbed with the promise unfulfilled. This is the untold story of our forefather Yaakov's life, told here for the first time. After Yaakov's sons Shimon and Levi take revenge on their sister's rapists by wiping out the entire city of Shechem, Yaakov takes his family, leaves the city they've lived in for years, and travels towards Beit El. On the way, in a place called Padan Aram, God appears to Yaakov. And I'm going to read the translation, so pardon me as I turn away. But God says to Yaakov, "Your name is Yaakov. Your name shall no longer be called Yaakov, but Yisrael shall be your name." And God named him Yisrael. "I," says God, "am the Almighty God. Be fruitful, multiply. A nation and a multitude of nations shall come into existence from you, and kings shall come forth from you. The land that I gave to Avram and to Yitzchak, I will give to you and your descendants." This is a great series of promises made by God. Torah students tend to focus on Yaakov being given an additional name, God's promise of Yaakov being the forefather of a great nation, and the land of Israel being given to Yaakov's descendants. Yaakov understood the promise to also include a legacy that would bear many nations. Yaakov didn't think that he was to be known as the forefather of one nation, but of many nations. Just one of these nations that he would produce would be the Jewish people. Yaakov was, and he learned this from God's promise of a multitude of nations. Yaakov was convinced that Rachel was to give birth to many children, each of whom would lead a nation themselves. Imagine his pain when immediately after this promise, Rachel dies in childbirth to only her second son. At this point, Yaakov still believes his first son, Yosef, is dead. So all the hope and promise that he had in his most beloved spouse would bring him sons that would lead many nations vanished with her premature passing. Yet in his faith, Yaakov believed that God would fulfill his promise some other way. Yaakov lives many more pained years. He waits patiently for God's promise to be fulfilled, and it never does. We can imagine his pain and his disappointment as he sat on his deathbed and his crisis of faith when he realizes his time has run out. He calls for Yosef, and it is then that he finally, for the first time, understands God's promise. While on his deathbed, Yaakov calls for Yosef. He recounts God's promise to him. And again, I apologize, I'm going to read. "God appeared to me in Luz, in the land of Canaan, and he blessed me. I will make you fruitful and cause you to multiply, and I will make you into a multitude of nations. I will give this land to your seed after you in an everlasting inheritance." In his commentary to this verse, Rashi quoted our sages' teachings about the background to Yaakov's message. And listen to this. This is going to really just give you a whole new insight. "God announced to me that another congregation of peoples was to be descended from me." This is what Yaakov tells Yosef. "A multitude of nations" means two in addition to Binyamin. "But no other son was born to me. But I now understand," Yaakov says to Yosef, "that one of my tribes was destined to be divided into two. So now I am giving you, Yosef, that gift." Yaakov recognized the blessing that he had been waiting for his entire life was right there with him. God wasn't going to give him more sons. The multitude that he had been anticipating was the multitude of tribes in his own family. Yaakov wasn't suffering on his deathbed. He was grateful, for he finally recognized he'd been blessed by God his entire life. There are so many times in our own life where we hope for something better. We dream of winning the lottery, a better job, a better home, a nicer car. Our sages taught us, "Ezu Asher," who is wealthy? Those that are happy with what they have. We tend to forget the blessings around us. Many of us have already won the lottery. We just need to recognize God's blessing in our own lives. What a powerful lesson that we get from Yaakov. Shabbat Shalom.